Welcome to Red, White, and Blue. I'm Gary Polland.
And I'm David Jones. Thank you for being here.
This week we're going to cover criminal justice reform, and we have three fascinating and well-informed guests. First, we have Jean Wu, who's a member of the Texas House of Representatives from Houston. Next, Mark Levin, who is the vice president of the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and is one of the leaders nationally in criminal justice reform. And Joanne Music, who is now head of the Felony Trial Bureau for the Harris County District Attorney's Office. But Joanne brings a lot to the table.
Oh, does she?
Yes, because she was a prosecutor and then she was an outstanding defense lawyer, so she gets it. So I welcome all three of you today.
Thank you.
Jean Wu, you're in a book. Pulitzer Prize winning author Lawrence Wright wrote a book called God Save Texas. And in it, there's an interview about what happened in the legislature when the Sanctuary City bill was being passed, which of course it has criminal justice implications. And in the book, it has Chief Acevedo saying that since all of this talk about give me your papers, 63% of rape reports are down.
Right.
So there's an amendment that includes the Show Me Your Papers bill, and you are quoted, sir, as saying, and tearfully saying, comparing the bill to the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act, and you say the Sanctuary Cities bill was the natural culmination of the bigoted, racist mentality that has emerged in Texas. Do you stand by these things?
I absolutely do.
Okay.
Well,
unfortunately, David, that's not our topic this week, and I'd love to discuss sanctuary cities with Gene, and I fundamentally disagree with his comments, but I want to talk about criminal justice, so I'm going to move the topic on to what it's about. Okay, Mark Levin. and I'll relate
Did
to
you
what
not
you
hear
said.
that the chief of police made a statement about criminal justice?
You mean the chief politician of Harris County? Yes. Yeah. Mark, let me ask you this. Is Sanctuary City bill that was passed by the legislature, is that hampering law enforcement based on your familiarity with the system in Texas?
Well, we really haven't taken a look at that. You know, honestly, what we've been focusing on is just trying to improve our criminal justice system, and that's a lot of big undertaking.
How long have you been working on that?
2005, I came on board in March of that year, and of course, as you know, Gary, we had then tens of thousands of more people incarcerated. Our crime rate has gone down 30% since then. Our incarceration rate's gone down 20%. We've closed 8 prisons. I mean, the juvenile facilities, which you know very well, we've gone from about 5,000 kids locked up back in 2005 to 900 at the state level today. So the progress has really been remarkable, and it's one of the few areas of bipartisanship, which is pretty exciting.
You claim in an article that you wrote for the Chronicle that the legislature has made some significant improvements in criminal justice, including ending debtor's prison on Class Cs, sealing records of even convictions, not just deferreds, for first-time DWIs and retroactively. That's a major accomplishment, by the way. I don't know how much credit you're going to take for it. And finally, there's some control over jailhouse snitches that was also passed. So I'm asking you, what's your reform agenda for 19?
Yeah, it's a lot of great bills there. And as Ronald Reagan said, if we don't care who gets the credit, we can get a lot done. And certainly Jean Wu and many of our legislative friends deserve a lot of credit. But I would say that going on for next session, raise the age is a big one. So Texas is one of just a handful of states left where 17-year-olds are automatically considered adults, even if they steal a bag of chips, right? And you get a permanent record potentially. And also get into county jails and other facilities where adults are housed and more likely to be physically and sexually abused. So anyway, we have some legislation, which Jean was one of the leaders on last session, got 93 votes in the House, and basically it would say that the default would be, like in nearly every other state, a 17-year-old who's still in high school, typically living with their parents, would be a youth. Now they could be certified as an adult for serious crimes. Now Missouri just passed it 34-1 today in their state Senate, and it'll be signed by the governor. So it'll just leave Texas, Georgia, Michigan, and 1 or 2 other states. So we really need to act on this. It'll reduce recidivism and improve outcomes for children in our
state. Are you in league with Bill Hammond, who's also a conservative who writes about criminal justice reform issues?
Yes, we're both part of the Texas Smart on Crime Coalition. Bill formerly headed the Texas Association of Business. We have Goodwill, a lot of other groups that are come together to work on criminal justice.
Do you think people believe what he says, which is that the criminal justice system is ineffective and expensive at $3 billion each year, that the war on drugs was a failure, and that Texas is the largest jailer in the United States, and definitely in need of reform, given that now 1 of every 100 adults is incarcerated, and we have 4.7 million people with criminal histories?
Well, yeah, I mean, some of those are national and some of those are Texas, but yeah, basically all correct. And the reality is, I mean, drug sentencing reform is another one. We have 17,000 people in Texas prisons for drug possessions, cost hundreds of millions of dollars every year. And we could certainly, for first time, and I mean, people are choosing state jail instead of probation for less than a gram of drugs. And Harris County's actually been able to correct that through some great work y'all have done in the DA's office to say, if you take this pretrial diversion, no record, and go through treatment, and that gives them the incentive instead of 5 years of probation versus several months in state jail. So Harris County's actually made great strides.
Joanne, I want to take you back to a comment that Mark made in terms of the reduction in the number of people in prison, the closing of prisons and the like, because you're on the front lines in the district attorney's office in Harris County. What have you noticed in terms of the impact on public safety by the reduction of the number of people in prison?
Well, it's sort of it's an interesting dynamic, because we say, being smart on crime can lead to lower recidivism rates, lower incarceration rates. But being smart means not everybody gets out of jail. It means the worst of the worst offenders are probably locked up and removed from society, while lower level offenders, nonviolent offenders, are diverted out of those systems. And that really does make our community safer, because those people get back to work, so they get back to their lives and their families. They can take care of themselves and their families. You lock somebody up in prison for 4 or 5 months, and I say prison, the state jail facility is a prison facility. So you lock him up for 4 or 5 months, he comes out, he doesn't have a job, his family is now on welfare, even if they weren't to begin with, because they've lost their main sole supporter. And then he also has a felony record now, so he can't get a job, he can't rent an apartment. It's a vicious cycle. So those type of offenders, if we can get them diverted, use the community service resources, community resources to make their lives a little bit better, we get them out of the system, and we can really focus the system on the serious violent offenders.
Okay, so
and that's what we're
there's
trying
a lot
to
of
do.
confusion about what the district attorney's office is using for diversion programs. As we know, there are pre-arrest diversion programs, and then there are Devin Anderson had post-arrest diversion programs, quite a few of them. So how is it that OG's diversion programs are differing from Devin Anderson?
Well, the biggest diversion program change was the marijuana program. Low-level misdemeanor amounts of marijuana, not packaged for sale, not for distribution, just simple possession. Talking about a person who perhaps uses marijuana in small quantities. That person is no longer arrested, booked, brought to jail, brought before a judge, and then placed on some sort, possibly on a diversion program. The Anderson administration had started diversion programs, but you still went through that entire front-end process. It was all front-loaded. So your police officer spends 2 to 3 hours off the street dealing with this particular person, because it seems like it would be really simple. You make a traffic stop, you grab the marijuana, and you take them on to jail. But by the time they do the police report, by the time they call the district attorney's office, and the district attorney's office types up charges, files them, you get them booked in the process. They're booked usually through the city jail, then transferred over to the county, where they're booked again. And it's just a vicious cycle that takes, at a minimum, a day out of his life. So we've eliminated that day.
The chief of police has said that citations are okay with him. And he's referring to that part of the
cite and release.
Yes, he says that's fine with him. And in fact, there are jurisdictions, small jurisdictions on the east part of Harris County who are not referring anybody. They're doing Class Cs. Right. And so I guess my question is, why aren't we doing more with other Class Bs than just marijuana? I mean, why shouldn't a shoplifter get the same benefit as somebody with grams of marijuana?
And that's something we are working towards. We do have a shoplifting diversion program. It is not necessarily pre-arrest at this point. We have the Clean and Green program, diversion, where you do some community service out here on the bayou with the community partners and do some cleaning up, and you get to work those cases off your record. We just are treading into this law enforcement pre-charging arena, but we need to test it out and see how it's working. There
And the cops the HPD is receptive to this.
They've been receptive to it, yes, because they see the benefit that they can get back on the street, get back to work, and focus on more serious offenses.
I have the numbers. Gary,
Excuse me.
I have the numbers.
I don't want the numbers.
The
I wanna ask
referral
Gene a
numbers.
question. I
Go
wanna ask
ahead.
Gene
Go
a
ahead.
question.
You don't want any more facts? That's fine.
No, I don't. I want to start hearing from our guests as opposed to your fact spouting. Gene, you were a leader in the last session of the legislature on lowering the age of juveniles. You fought hard. You did really
One
well
of
in
the
the
leaders,
House.
yeah.
One of the key leaders. You should be applauded for that. Kind of give us the reasoning behind why you think the age needs to be raised.
So, when I got first sworn into office in 2013, there were 12 states left in the nation that hadn't done this. By 2015, it was down to 9. And last session, it was down to 7. And as we went through session, 2 more states dropped off. And now another state is about to drop off. Texas is about to be the dead last in the nation, literally the dead last in the nation that has not done this. Almost every state in the nation has managed and figured out how to do this and done it pretty painlessly. What it is really about having a more effective system. Some people say, well, we need to make it 18 so it matches what the federal system does. It'll matches what federal law requires. It'll match what the U.S. Supreme Court requires. But if you come down to it, it comes to a simple fact that the juvenile system is more effective in preventing kids from committing other future crimes. And that is a really, really big deal. Because look, Mark talked about crime is really expensive. It costs about $22,000, $21,000 a year to put an adult human being in prison for a single year, right? We have right now about 150,000 people in Texas in prison right now, and they'll be there for the year. And that's a lot of money. If you look at the future cost, the cost of how much it costs to file a DA's case, how much it costs to have a cop be off the street to file the police report and do all that stuff, there's a cost of society in that. There's a cost to you, cost to me, in not just in tax dollars, but in law security. And if you can take a juvenile who committed a petty offense, even at 17, and spend the extra money to work with them, figure out why they're doing what they're doing, help them make better decisions, help them fix some of their family situations, get them mental health care, get them off of drug abuse, off of substance abuse, you could immediately save a tremendous amount of money. And if you can prevent that kid at 17 from picking up an adult conviction that in Texas will follow them for the rest of their natural life, that means you have now opened up doors for that kid that were going to be slammed shut. Being able to go to college, being able to get any kind of license in the state of Texas. Even, not just to be an attorney, but to cut hair.
Barber's license, yeah,
to
absolutely.
cut hair.
You and Gary both practice juvenile law, and so I'll let you and Gary explain why it is that the system is failing so many juvenile offenders in the Harris County because of the hundreds, literally hundreds, who are detained for technical infractions while they're on probation, rather than have the adult probation or the juvenile probation system resolve the issue. They spend days and weeks in detention. Where is my guess is 2 out of 3 juvenile judges that we could blame.
Okay.
No, that's fair.
Before we get, but I think I see where you're trying to get to.
That was a headline in the Chronicle.
Yeah,
that must mean it's true.
No, but
right?
I think the bigger problem is on the adult side, where you have adults on probation. They're provided no assistance, no help, no counseling, no therapy, nothing to do with their substance abuse problem, and they're put on these long probations, and they're getting popped for technical violations. I think that is a much bigger problem. I feel,
you don't want to answer the question about why so many juveniles are being detained.
In my experience, in having practiced law in the juvenile courts for the last 5-6 years,
as a prosecutor and as a
former prosecutor, I feel that my experience, and I can't speak for everyone, that our judges have been relatively fair about what constitutes a violation. I have been in front of the judges that the child committed another offense, but it was explainable. It was not necessarily excusable, but we saw what the problem was. The family and the juvenile figured out the solution and how to prevent that from happening again, and the judge put him back on probation.
Well,
Mark,
and
he's missing the
Well,
thrust
no,
of my
and I
question.
read the articles on this, and you know, Harris County was part of the JDAI through the Casey Foundation.
Right,
got the
and they
detention numbers
changed the
really low.
system.
Now they did creep back up again on technical violations, kids that missed appointments, weren't taking their medication, and it wasn't just that they went to detention, but the length of stay was too long. And so I do think they're, in light of that, trying to review.
I don't
it
know.
and
I don't.
improve.
I mean, I'm there day to day,
You-
and
I
you
was
were,
gonna say,
Joanne.
I was there
I
for
don't have
20
kids
years.
that are
This-
because they
right.
missed an appointment. They're in custody. I have kids who are released on an aggravated robbery case with a leg monitor and go out and commit another aggravated robbery, and then they get detained and they don't get out.
Right.
I
Well,
mean,
that's
just
a horse
how
of a
it
different
is.
color. Yeah,
but
we
I
have
think
to
that
separate.
leads kind of back into what we were talking about with this, raise the age.
Right.
You get juveniles now that age out of the system and into the adult system too quickly. They're not matured. They've not gotten the benefit of the resources of the juvenile system. And so they're in this vicious cycle that all of a sudden they're an adult. Now, adult probation has done some wonderful things in the past, I think, 5 to 10 years, but probably last 5 more. They've beefed up their counseling and services. But the difference is in adult probation, you focus on the adult offender, might be a 17-year-old. If that 17-year-old were in the juvenile system, and y'all know this because we've all been over there for 20 some odd years now, and if those children are on probation, they have counseling not only for the child but for the family.
Right.
They come
for
into
the
your home.
siblings.
They even come into
They
your
come
home
into
to
the
do it.
home.
They work with the
It is
schools. In the
so
adult
much
system, they're supposed to
more-
hold a job as a physician.
There's a reason
Right.
why the juvenile system is
It's more
is
expensive.
4 times more expensive than the adult
But
system.
it's worth it
Yeah.
because the resource becomes wider. It's a bigger net
Yeah.
to give them the survival tactics.
But
By-
more expensive in the short term because the revocations are much lower
Absolutely.
to state lockups.
So
yeah.
by even conservative accounting, the efficacy rate of juvenile probation versus adult probation is 1/3 higher, is 30% higher. The juveniles are 30%. Kids that go through the juvenile system, 17-year-olds that go through the juvenile system versus the adult system are 1/3, 30% less likely to commit another offense in their lifetime.
That's a big deal.
And that is a really,
And
really
we
big
see
deal.
that here in Texas, even with a 16-year-old versus a 17-year-old. That 16-year-old who got in the juvenile system comes out far better and less likely to reoffend than the 17-year-old who committed the exact same crime, but he happens to be 2 days older and ends up in
And
the
you know,
adult
and the
system.
17-year-olds, we all know what happens. If they're in county court and they're in jail, they'll plead for
Yeah,
10
absolutely.
days
Because
and
they
get
want
credit
out.
and be done. And you tell them, oh, you
want
can do then get these programs. I don't want the help.
They don't want it because
No.
they don't.
Yeah.
Who
In
wants
juvenile,
to
you got
sign
no
up for-
choice.
Well, we're trying to
Right.
fit a square peg in a round hole because 17-year-olds are covered by the compulsory school law. They have to be in high school. And we're telling them to get a job and that they got to pay adult probation
And
fees and all of
we,
this.
we recognize children don't make good choices, but yet we put them in adult court and we say, make a choice. Do you want a conviction for the rest of your life or do you want help? I'll take that conviction and get out of
Whatever's
jail.
easy, right.
And-
It's the easy route.
I couldn't tell you the number of parents that have come to me and said, like, I wanted to be with my 17-year-old in court because he's not ready to make that decision on his own. He needed my help to help him make that decision. But the parents aren't welcome. I mean, if they know about the case, that's fine, and they can show up.
Juvenile system, of course, they're part of the process.
They're part
part
of
of
the
the
process.
process.
They're served. They appear with the child.
Right.
And the judges can actually hold the parents accountable in a juvenile case if the parents are not doing their jobs.
So, what are the prospects? This session coming up in January. Assuming you're getting reelected, I assume that'll be the case.
Yes.
Let's
God,
just make
God
that
willing,
assumption.
when I worked on this in 2017, we got 93. We actually could have had 100. We could have had almost veto
That's great.
proof. There's a hearing that was called at the same time, and a bunch of members that would have voted for it were
You're talking
off
about raise the age?
Raise the age.
Yeah.
Out of the House, almost 100 votes.
That's a lot of votes.
Okay, out of 150, almost to 2/3. And when I talked to people, I talked to every single member who voted on it, who voted yes, who voted no. And the majority of people who voted no because of money, because they were afraid that their counties, who are already being screwed by the legislature in terms of juvenile justice funding, were going to continue taking it on the chin. And I want raise the age to happen, but my goal for next session is not raise the age. My goal for next session is a fundamental reform of the entire juvenile justice system. The primary thing in the middle of it is increased funding. And I think this is an adequacy and equity issue for a lot of the small counties. We actually took the numbers from.
They don't have the resources. You're right.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
they don't.
We actually asked TJJD for their numbers. And we asked, tell me about the 900 kids you have in custody right now. And almost 2/3, actually 3/4 of the kids in custody in state prison for juveniles right now are in there for like what we call non-determinate sentences, meaning that they're not likely to be transferred. So most of the kids in there, 3/4 in there, are in there because of behavioral issues. And we dug down a little further and says most of those kids, while a good chunk are coming from Harris County because Harris County is so massive, a good chunk are actually coming from small rural counties. Why? Because they don't have services.
don't have
Yeah, some of them are
local
mentally
options.
ill, for example,
Yeah.
and there's no
no money.
there.
We're
and there's no
lucky in
services.
Harris County that the juvenile probation department is really beefed up.
Right.
I mean, we're fortunate, so we have the resources to address those concerns. But as a defense attorney, I practiced in numerous counties. I went to juvenile courts in probably 10 or 15 counties, and it's true they
Right.
just don't have the same resources, the same setup.
Here's where Harris County also stands out. Here's a chart about those who are on life without parole. And right now, since 2007, we've got 263. That's triple the number of any other county in the state of Texas. Dallas, Bexar, Tarrant, huge numbers. We've had the most executions in the state is from Harris County. We've had the most exonerations of innocent people from Harris County. So my question to you is the present DA getting any of this under control? Because she campaigned on, it sounded like there are going to be very few death penalty cases anymore.
Well, I can tell you, I serve on the committee that we review all capital murder cases.
Oh, I read it. It's now a democratic process.
It is. It is.
Did you
Imagine
know that?
I read it.
But no,
With a small d.
We have,
Right.
we have a committee, and I can't speak to the exact prior administration. I mean, I was in the office a long time ago, and I know kind of how it worked. But I think it's a marked change from what has occurred in the past. So rather than simply pass the recommendation up the chain, it used to go from the person handling the case to their division chief, to their bureau chief, and everybody would sign off and give their opinion. We now meet collectively as a committee and a group, and it truly is by majority vote after we've heard everything
Yeah, and I
from
think
the
that
prosecutor
you
and
just announced
debated
your
it.
first death penalty case.
Exactly.
You've been in office
and I'll
almost
tell you,
2
even
years.
Kim is Kim Ogg would be the tiebreaker, if you will, but just because she's stated a position one way or the other doesn't mean that's the way the committee comes out.
Why shouldn't
And
we,
she's
why shouldn't
fine
we
with
have
that.
laymen or social science people, pastors on the committee that's making a decision about life and death?
I think,
It's called a jury.
yeah, I think that's where the jury comes in. To determine up front what the legal issues are. That that's what goes into whether or not we're going to seek the death penalty.
Well,
what are those legal issues? Is this a person? Juries barely understand whether this person is likely to reoffend or likely to reform and mitigating evidence. They don't understand that
We don't
much.
take a position on that, but I'll tell you on the life without parole and other really long sentences, you might look in Seattle, Dan Satterberg, who's the district attorney there, but they've gone back and looked at cases of their predecessors, not just wrongful convictions, but cases that wouldn't have gotten as long a sentence as
Today.
would now, and went to the parole board in Washington State. And as
Well, that's
a DA,
interesting.
how ironic is that, saying I think
Here's
you
a
should...
here's a quote from a gentleman who's speaking to the issue of too many life without paroles in Harris County. He says life without parole was an unintentional gift to major urban prosecutors. It makes it very easy to dispose of a large number of violent, often youthful offenders without any more thought than one would need to toss away a piece of garbage.
Okay.
Is that true?
I'm not sure that that's true. Because
not true now, is it?
Yeah, I don't think it's true today, especially in Kim Ogg's administration, because we're only even seeking that in capital cases where the statute applies. So a capital is either multiple murders or the murder of a child or a murder in the course of some other felony. Right? And so we're talking about violent offenders that even qualify for the death penalty. And then we're looking at, what are the factors? What is their background? What is the mitigation? We even ask the defense attorney to present a packet of information if they want to. Comes to the committee, we all review it.
But outside of that, outside of capitals, the problem that I see that needs to be fixed in the future are these sort of enhancements. Texas's version of the 3 strikes. You have people who are arrested for drugs whose options for punishment is 25 to life. And when I was in the office, that always made me feel very, very uncomfortable to even make that offer. Say like you're busted for like 2 grams of cocaine, and your options for punishment is 25 to life or not, or go to trial.
Let me give Mark a last 15 seconds. Mark, are you for a pre-arrest diversion programs for state jail felons with small amounts of narcotics?
Absolutely. I mean, and it's already working with the reintegration court in Harris County. I mean, their numbers, if you look, Theresa May, the head of probation.
Those people have been in jail.
Oh, you're talking about pre-arrest?
I'm talking about pre-arrest.
Well, I mean, I think as long as the officers have the tools to do the screening, but you look at the recidivism of people that are going on this diversion program versus those that go to state jail for a few months, lose their job, lose their family, it's much better for those that stay in the community.
Great conversation.
So we got to lock up those we're afraid of.
Great conversation, Gene Wu, Joanne Music, Mark Levin, and we will see you next week on Red, White, and Blue.